Get started. Stephen, welcome everyone, and here's Stephen.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Stephen Cohen, and on behalf of the Mirowitz Center, I want to welcome all of you this afternoon to this program, which is co-sponsored with the National Council of Jewish Women, St. Louis branch. We're delighted to welcome you all, and in particular, to welcome our distinguished guests, the first of whom in April 2021 became the third African-American, the second woman, and the first African-American woman to hold the position of mayor of St. Louis. She started her career as a public servant in 2002 when she was appointed as Democratic Committee woman of the 8th Ward in the city of St. Louis. And she served 2 terms in the Missouri House of Representatives and was selected as the first African-American woman in Missouri history to hold the position of Assistant Minority Floor Leader. She also is the first African-American woman to serve as Treasurer of St. Louis. Mayor Jones has a bachelor's degree in finance from Hampton University and a master's degree in health administration from the St. Louis University School of Public Health. She is a graduate of the Executives in State and Local Government program at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government, and she has served as Vice President of Public Finance for Blake Robert Van, LLC, an investment banking firm, as well as adjunct faculty at the Anheuser-Busch School of Business at Harris Stowe State University. She is the recipient of many awards and titles, and the one I believe of which she is the most proud is to be the mother of Aiden. We also welcome today our friend Rachel Lippmann. Rachel has been with us before on Mirowitz programs, and we're delighted to have her back. She covers court, public safety, and city politics for St. Louis Public Radio. She joined the NPR station in St. Louis in 2008 after spending 2 years in Lansing covering the Michigan Capitol and various other state political, as she calls it, shenanigans for NPR's member station there. She has an undergraduate degree from Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism and a master's in public affairs reporting from the University of Illinois at Springfield. We're especially happy at this time to also be able to extend to her on behalf of all of you our best wishes for her upcoming marriage, which has been delayed repeatedly because of COVID. It's finally come, and we're happy that it's arrived. Thank you both again for joining us, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for that welcome. The journalist in me would be remiss if I didn't make one small correction. We never actually had to delay the wedding for the pandemic. We always planned on a long engagement so that we could accommodate the situation, as it will. So just a couple of quick housekeeping measures before we get started here. I know Judy is going to have everyone on mute. If you have a question for the mayor, you can either write your question in the chat or just write something, I have a question, or kind of put your hand up or wave, and I'll try and keep track of who has a question. I know Judy's going to be helping. I'm going to ask the mayor a few questions for about 15-20 minutes, but get your questions into the chat or write them down, and after that we will make sure to hear from you. That is what we are here for. So Mayor Jones, as Stephen mentioned, you are currently the mayor of St. Louis, but I know you did a lot of things before that, right? Tell us a little bit about your pre-political career.
Yes, well, it's great to see you, Rachel, and congratulations on your upcoming wedding. I think that's wonderful. Maybe one of these days I'll be lucky enough to find somebody to want to marry me, but that's another story for another time. And thank you to the Mirowitz Center for having me today. Yes, well, I got a secret for your listeners and your viewers today. I never wanted to be a politician. I'm what some may call a reluctant leader. And my father was in politics, as many of you know, and his career didn't end the greatest. So I decided I was going to do something totally different. But my mother always used to say, God rest her soul, that the quickest way to make God laugh is to tell him what you would never do. So I got turned on to politics in 2002 when I became committee woman. Then State Representative Robin Wright Jones asked me to succeed her in the House. And just before I launched my campaign, about a year before I launched my campaign, I had an unexpected pregnancy with my son, who is the love of my life. But I thought that that was a signal that I shouldn't go into politics, but actually my test became my testimony. And he is now the reason why I am here and the reason behind a lot of the things that I advocate for, especially policies around families and children. So I spent 4 years in the House. He came with me for the first 2 of those 4 years, and he was the floor baby. And a lot of my colleagues that I'm still friends with to this day on both sides of the aisle are just amazed at how much he has grown since our days in the House. And then also, again, I ran for treasurer because I wanted to come home and be closer to my family. And however, I couldn't talk about that on the campaign trail. Back then, even this was just, 10 years ago, there were still a lot of double standards around women running in public office, especially single mothers. So I had to lead with my experience, lead with my education and my capabilities. And if the room was warm enough, I could mention that I was a mom. And then obviously I ran for mayor after becoming treasurer. Didn't win the first time, but came back around 4 years later, and here I am.
So before you decided to go into politics, before, as you mentioned, God laughed and said you're going into politics, what were some of the civilian world experience that you have, if you will?
Yeah, so I have a master's in health administration from the St. Louis University School of Public Health and Social Justice. So I was a health administrator for many years at the Betty Jean Kerr People's Health Centers, and also worked at Cardinal Glennon. Before that, I owned my own business. I was just kind of out, roaming around trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I owned a restaurant with my dad at one point. I worked for TWA. As a reservations assistant, and again worked in healthcare. So just a myriad of things. But I look at all of those experiences as experiences that helped me to become the person I am and really set the stage. They were all service related businesses, and I think of politics as a service, as a public servant. So. But yeah, I had a myriad of jobs in the private sector before dipping my toe in the waters of politics.
And here I thought you were going to reveal that you had been a flight attendant, Mayor Jones. Little tidbit. So you've now been in room 200, which is the mayor's office at City Hall, for, we'll say exactly 6 months, but pretty close to 6 months. What's been the most surprising thing about the office that everyone can see behind you, both in terms of, the physical space and just the role that you now fill in the city?
Well, I would say that it is an honor and a privilege to serve. And yes, the physical space. Do y'all see this place? Oh my God. It feels like a museum some days, and there's a bust of Lindbergh to the side, and I feel like he's staring at me when I'm not looking at him. So I call this place Night at the Museum. But I think the other thing that surprises me a lot is just all of the moving pieces and the things that come with this job. And I've really gotten close to my security detail. They've become like little brothers to me. Well, one of them's older than me, but they become like brothers. And we look out for each other. And my staff, we're really gelling and building a great relationship. And I am just super excited that the cabinet that I've started to appoint are some very smart and capable people who all have one mission, which is making sure that we work our hardest to build back better when it comes to St. Louis. And we have an awesome opportunity ahead of us with the ARPA funds and other pots of funding that may be coming from the federal government.
And you made history as mayor, and as I understand it, your cabinet is also making history in many ways. I think the health director, the city councilor.
Yes, absolutely. I have been able to appoint some of the smartest Black women I know, and they're literally, I'm finding them everywhere. Our streets director is the first Black woman to be streets director. Dr. Mati /Wayo Davis as our health director, who's an infectious disease specialist and a public health expert. Sheena Hamilton, who comes to us from Dow Bennett, is an accomplished attorney in her own right. So I'm just excited about some of the people that we've been able to, that I've been able to appoint, and really looking forward to working with them as we try to help our citizens become the best that they can be, and also, make sure that City Hall delivers efficient government service.
Over these last 6 months, what would you say has been the biggest challenge that you found yourself running into, but then also the biggest success you've been able to have?
I would say the biggest success, I'll start there, has been some of the budget wins that we've been able to get so far. We came in the door, literally our second day at work was our budget presentation at the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, where we were able to zero out the budget for the workhouse to begin the process to close it. We're not quite there yet, but we're still on track. And then also being able to shift some money in public safety, so we're able to deliver services in a way that deploys the right professional to the right call. And so we're in the process of hiring almost 30 social workers in the Department of Health and Department of Human Services, so we can take care of our unhoused. And so again, we can beef up the Cops and Clinicians program, which to date has been able to divert over 98% of the people that they encounter from the criminal justice system, diverting over 70% of people from our emergency rooms. And so those little things actually add up and money saved from our healthcare system, as well as our criminal justice system. My biggest challenge so far, I would say the thing that keeps me up at night, is trying to get a handle on our homicides and our gun violence. Every morning when I wake up, I get a report via email from our police department that shows us the activity from the evening before. And my heart bleeds a little bit every day when I see that someone has been assaulted or someone has lost their life due to gun violence, because I feel helpless sometimes, because we can't do anything on the local level as far as passing common sense gun safety laws, because the Missouri legislature has literally tied our hands and preempted us from doing it. And also the Second Amendment Preservation Act really ties the hands of our law enforcement. And guns are everywhere. And I'm not against anybody's right to own a weapon. I just think that they should be registered, and we should have some common sense practices when it comes to gun ownership. And I don't think that any law-abiding citizen would disagree with me on that.
A reminder that if you have a question for Mayor Jones, you can let me know in the chat, and we'll open it up in about 10-15 minutes. So Mayor Jones, you talked about your son, Aiden, at the top, and how he influences what you do. On election night, he joked that he was now the first son. How is he settling into that role? I think he's 14 or 15 now.
He's 14 and he's settling in pretty well. He asked me for his own detail that just for him specifically, and I told him no. They're responsible for looking out for you when you're with me, and I think it's been sort of a confidence booster for him. He has, he's already a tall kid, and I've just noticed in these last several months since school has started that he's really coming into his own as a confident young man, especially not just academically, but also on the court, on the basketball court. He's been very confident in his abilities, and I hope that I've been able to help him with that by letting him know that whatever you can be, whatever you want to be. If you've seen that your mother has been able to be mayor, then the possibilities are endless for you.
Has he used the first son excuse to try and get away with stuff yet?
Kind of, sort of. He tries to use it to get away with me bringing him lunch sometimes to school. And, Mom, I'm the first son. Don't you want to bring me my lunch?
So in other words, just a typical teenager.
Yeah, yeah.
So on election night, I was at your event at the Omega Center, and your sorority sisters from Delta Sigma Theta serenaded you with their Sweetheart song. And as I understand it, it's sung at special occasions, weddings, graduations, etc. What was that moment like to have that them pay tribute to you in that way?
Oh, it was amazing and so touching because I have sung the Sweetheart song to many of my sorority sisters more times than I'd like to know. And to actually be the one in the middle, because when we sing the Sweetheart song, we surround the person that we're serenading and put them in the middle. And it just happened so fast. You know, someone said, "Hey, Tishaura, come here." And then I was pulled one direction, and then all of a sudden they started singing. And I was like, "Oh my God, yes, oh yes, that is for me." But I think it just it was the cherry on top of that entire night of all of the things that were happening after the announcement of the win.
And if I had thought about this ahead, I would have found the video that I have of this moment and put it in the chat, but wasn't thinking that far ahead. If any of you are on Twitter, you can look for my tweets for that night. I have a little snippet of the mayor's sorority sisters singing that to her. You've mentioned that Aiden helps shape your policies. What are some of the changes or things you want to advance where Aiden has, played a role in how you think about it?
Yeah, so Aiden and I were having a conversation in the months leading up to the election. And he was asking me, what are some of the responsibilities of a mayor? And I told him, well, the mayor's responsible for, running city hall, for, making sure the streets and potholes get filled, the streets get paved, and also the police and some other departments. And he said, "Wait a minute, you're responsible for the police?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Oh, well, that means I'll be safe." And it hit me like a ton of bricks because I thought, oh my, not that I didn't think that he had a false sense of security, but he felt that his mother had to become mayor in order for him to feel safe with interactions with law enforcement, which we know has been a problem for young Black men and women. And that sort of became a guiding principle, like how can we transform our public safety system so our law enforcement officers see our children as children, even though he is a 6'2", 14-year-old, how can he still be seen as a young boy who's going to make mistakes? And how can we make sure that he lives to tell about those mistakes? And so that has sort of become a guiding principle, and especially with how we're trying to deploy the right professional to the right call, making sure that we are staffing our public safety department with different types of professionals to make sure that we are responding in the correct way so we can make sure that we don't have bad interactions with law enforcement. Like we saw, for example, back in 2014 with Kajimi Powell, who was having a mental health breakdown, but was killed within seconds of the arrival of law enforcement to intervene. So we need to, and so that's been sort of my guiding principle as we try to transform public safety. We're deploying the right resources, that we're leading with health and healthy communities, and also getting input from our communities, because the people closest to the problem are closest to the solution.
That leads nicely into Phil Miller's question. He said, what are possibilities that you see for the future of policing in St. Louis? You will, for example, in February, have the chance to select a new police chief. So in addition to what you've mentioned, what are some of the other ways you see that you might shape policing in the future of St. Louis?
Well, just as I outlined, our three guiding principles for public safety: healthy communities, deploying the right professional to the right call, and making sure that we're involving communities in those decisions. I think that I know that we will develop our public safety plan with those guiding principles. And then also we are holding a lot of public town halls. We're actually having one this evening to discuss what people want to see in a police chief and what people also want to see in the future of policing. And the number one issue that they tell us is 911. And so we are working diligently to transform our 911 operations to make sure that we're staffing them up, that we pay them better, and that we're combining our dispatchers with fire, EMS, and police all into one center. And these things, this system has been set up this way for many, many years, and it's going to take time to dismantle. But we're committed to making sure that we can make sure that your calls are answered when you call for help.
We're getting some great questions into the chat, so please keep them coming. And again, if you aren't comfortable using the chat, I'll raise your hand and I'll try and get to everyone. This question comes from Susan. She said, what ideas do you have to increase the population of the city of St. Louis, given that the numbers have dropped over many years? I think the latest estimates are that we're just above 300,000, but not by much.
Yes, this has been a problem for many years. I mean, some of you may remember that at the turn of the 20th century, St. Louis had almost 800,000 people within the city limits, and now we're just over 300,000. And I think that's one of the reasons why I ran for mayor, to right some of the historic wrongs in our city. And when I say historic wrongs, I mean the redlining and intentional disinvestment in North St. Louis and parts of South St. Louis that have led families to flee St. Louis for whatever reason. So we have to turn the tide by attracting more jobs, more companies to come to St. Louis, and we're having conversations on those levels. I know that you saw the recent announcement of Deli Star. That's moving from St. Louis, from Illinois to St. Louis, and we'll be providing jobs starting at, I think, $40,000 or $50,000 that require just a high school diploma. It requires us working with our school district, even though the mayor has no control over our school district. That doesn't mean that the city can't be a better partner. So there are more times than not that we're in conversation with our public schools and our charter schools for how do we find pathways for our graduates to have jobs that pay a living wage so they can take care of themselves and their families. And also rebuilding our city and the physical infrastructure that we have to rebuild. A lot of times kids don't see any hope when all they see is vacant lots and vacant buildings around them. So how do we change their environment to one that they are hopeful when they leave the house and go to school? And one of the other responsibilities I feel like I have as mayor when it comes to our children, our babies, is that even though I don't have any authority over the school district, I think it's my responsibility to make sure that we provide an environment for our children to show up ready to learn and free of trauma every day, because that helps our teachers, that also helps our families. And so I am focused on changing the environment that our children show up in every day.
So you mentioned righting historical wrongs, and you are part of a group of mayors that is exploring reparations and using some funding to solve historic income inequality. Tell me a little bit more about that effort, how you're thinking about reparations or income inequality and what mayors can do to right some of those wrongs.
Well, some of the things we can do to right the wrongs are, let me back up. I don't see reparations as just payment for past wrongs. I see reparations as also policy. So like my sister in government, Corey Bush, always says, it's reparations and so that's righting historic wrongs that have left decades of St. Louis, or left St. Louisans behind for decades. That's intentional investment in neighborhoods that haven't seen any investment or feel like their government has left them behind or just isn't involved with them at all. So, reparations to me means what can I do on the local level to redirect investment to areas and invest in those areas so they can then look like your Central West Ends and your Tower Groves and your Shaw neighborhoods.
It's well into a question from Marcia Mellitz. The city is getting a very large amount of money from ARPA and other federal COVID relief. How are you going to use those COVID funds to have the greatest impact on the city? And how does that fit into righting those historic wrongs and, investing in those areas that have not been invested in for decades?
I think that has been one of the greatest gifts that coincided with me being elected, is having a pot of funds that we can use in very specific ways to to try to tackle equity in our city. So, we've already passed a bill that with the first 135 million. So we're focused on keeping shots in arms, keeping people in their homes, and addressing public safety. So we put money towards community violence intervention programs in a partnership with the White House, that we are in constant conversation with several cities about using those funds for what they call CVI, or community violence intervention. We've put $8 million into our public health infrastructure to make sure that we can increase our vaccination rates, so we can all stop wearing masks and hopefully stop using Zoom. We're also looking at direct investments in infrastructure, small business assistance, direct payments to people in the tune of $500 to almost 10,000 families. So we're making sure that at least the first tranche of these funds are things that directly affect people's everyday lives.
So getting anything passed through, et cetera, requires negotiation with the Board of Aldermen, and there are currently 28 of them. How would you say your relationship is with the current board, and how are you at working with, negotiating with all of those different individuals?
It ebbs and flows. Some days they like me, some days they don't. But what I have learned in my first 6 months, and also talking to my brother and sister mayors across the country, is that there's no different in any other city. And so, I try to work with them wherever I can. We invite them to monthly meetings, monthly happy hours, or bi-monthly happy hours. Also, we try to work with them and invite them to things that are going on in their ward where, we'll be present. So trying, and we also have a liaison whose number one job is to make sure that he tries to keep the alder people happy. It doesn't always succeed, but we all, again, we realize we won't always agree, but we just try to work on the things that we agree on.
So the new maps will be for 14 wards, most likely, regardless of how they're drawn. There's some question over whether it will be the aldermen, or if a new measure passes, it could be a citizen commission. Do we have too many aldermen right now? Will 14 be a little bit easier to deal with, or is it just going to be 14 different personalities where you'll still have to negotiate?
I think again, as I've talked to my brother and sister mayors across the country, even when there are a few as 7, you still find that that there still are going to be issues, and there's still going to be disagreements. But I am finding that St. Louis has the most aldermen for a city our size. When I talk to my colleagues across the country and we compare notes, because we asked each other the same questions. How big is your city? How many council people do you have? How much do you get paid? Those things. And I find that for our population, compared to other cities our size, St. Louis has more aldermen per capita than other cities our size.
So you won't play necessarily a role in drawing the maps. That'll be negotiations among the aldermen, but if it's presented to you as an ordinance, would there be any reason that you would veto a map, or what would you be looking for in a new map where you would say, yes, this is good for the city of St. Louis?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that this process, in my opinion, process is policy. So I just want to make sure that this process is transparent and open to suggestions from everybody who wants to make a suggestion. I haven't yet seen what the first iterations will look like. I just want to make sure that they're fair, that that we follow the principles of redistricting on the national level, that communities of interest are cut together, that they're contiguous, and that, we're not gerrymandering wards that look like, dead lizards or, salamanders.
Anyone has seen the proposed maps out of Illinois, there are quite a few dead lizard looking districts in those. So Jen Bernstein asks, you've brought up a couple of times that you speak to mayors from the other major cities and cities across the United States. Have you bonded with any of the mayors in particular? And just in general, what do you learn from listening and talking to them?
Yes, so I've had existing relationships with several mayors before becoming one myself. So I felt like I was the kid always sitting at the little kids table, and now I'm finally able to sit at the big kids table. And one of a couple of mayors that I'm very close to, Denver's mayor Michael Hancock and I have been friends since about 2014, 2013. He gives me great advice. We have been able to go to Denver and actually bring some of the things back that they do to St. Louis, like when we visited their STAR program, which is a alternative response program. I was just totally impressed by it, that although we have cops and clinicians now, I would hope to eventually move to a response system that doesn't involve officers, that involves EMT and a licensed clinical social worker or other behavioral health professional, because sometimes that's what's required on the call. And that also frees up our officers to do the work that they were trained to do in our academies. I've also really enjoyed getting to know Mount Vernon's, New York's mayor, Sean Patterson Howard. We were in a Bloomberg cohort together in New York back in September. And really, sometimes when you feel like your city is dysfunctional, all you have to do is talk to another mayor, and you'll find that there's the same amount or more dysfunction in their city. And then also Quentin Lucas and I have become really close. If everybody has noticed, we are always interacting with each other on Twitter. He was also in New York in my Bloomberg cohort, and also he's in leadership with me in the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So now everybody from across the country is looking at these two mayors from Missouri on the national stage, and it's been quite humbling. And actually, Quentin's going to be here this weekend. We're going to do a ride along. We're going to look at some neighborhoods, and I'm going to take him to a blues game.
Is there any barbecue rivalry going on between the two of you? I feel like that's what that's rooted in.
Oh, there's going to be some barbecue involved too.
All right. As it should. So Susan is asking, she said, I am glad to hear you are communicating with Superintendent Calvin Adams of the St. Louis Public Schools. And she said, what is your communication with the St. Louis Board of Education? And this is the first time, I think it's been 2 years now, that we've had an elected board, 2 or 3 years overseeing the St. Louis Public Schools rather than an appointed board.
Yes, so I have regular conversations with our school board members as well. I want to keep them involved into what's going on in City Hall. So I have regular conversations with the board chair, Dr. Joyce Roberts, as well as the member that I was able to appoint, Alicia Saunier. Like I said, definitely want to make sure that I keep them in contact with what we're doing. And one of the things we're working on right now is, the board is about to do a citywide plan for education. And they've asked me to be a part of that, which I wholeheartedly agree, because we cannot talk about economic development in the city and rebuilding infrastructure and rebuilding parts of our neighborhoods if we don't have education at the table. Education and economic development go hand in hand. So I'm again building those relationships and keeping those relationships and making sure that we may not always agree, but at least they know what I'm doing and vice versa.
Is also asking about the proliferation of charter schools. She said, are you involved at all in making sure that we do not keep proliferating charters, since we will not have enough students to populate our public schools and our charters? Right.
So when I was in the State House, I was the primary sponsor of a bill to increase the accountability of charter schools and match them with our district schools. And one of the provisions in that bill that was subsequently struck down was that the mayor at the time, was Mayor Slay, wanted to be able to sponsor charter schools. And the legislature did not agree with him that he should be able to do that. I think that we need to definitely press the pause button on all new schools. And again, how can we take care of the kids that we have rather than opening new schools? I would say that on the district and the charter level, we need to press the pause button to do a whole evaluation of our education system and how we're delivering services to our children.
Harry is asking, we have COVID money coming in, $500 or $500 million worth. We also have the NGA on the north side, which is the biggest investment that that region has seen in a while. What impact do you think that the NGA site, once it is fully built up, could have on North St. Louis?
Oh my God. So we're already seeing an impact that NGA is going to have. One of the ways that we're seeing that is the tax sales, the quarterly tax sales of properties on our courthouse steps. Usually, most of those properties are turned over to LRA because people don't buy them. In the last 3 tax sales, only 1 property has been turned over to LRA, which means that there are some buyers that are speculating on St. Louis. And then part of the NGA process, or part of the building process, is there are 6 neighborhoods, primarily Black neighborhoods, that surround NGA. And we're going to be doing some planning with the people in those neighborhoods to let us know what they want to see in those neighborhoods. So it's going to be a really delicate balancing act as NGA nears completion, to make sure that the neighborhoods that surround it aren't gentrified, and that the people who have been living there and investing in those neighborhoods for decades are able to participate in the generational wealth that will be built as the property values increase. And the other thing that we're paying strict attention to is the jobs that NGA will bring from all of the industries that feed into the geospatial agency. And we're trying to make sure that equity is at the center, that our children from SLPS and other public schools have an opportunity to train now for those jobs. And so there are some wonderful things going on, partnerships with Harris-Stowe State University. There are training programs where kids can train for entry-level jobs, which pay about $60,000, $65,000 a year. And the training program is only a year long. So we're just making sure that we're staying involved and staying on top of the project as it develops. And there have been some great partners there as well. The Vice Admiral who's over this project is a wonderful, wonderful man, and really gets it and wants to make sure that equity is at the center as the facility nears completion.
So Eunice and John have a question that I've heard from a lot of people. They write, I am a proud St. Louisan and we have much to be proud of. But in the last few years, my wife and I are hesitant to come to my own old home territory, the central corridor of 4th and Washington to 18th. He used to work along there. He said, we no longer feel safe on Metrolink, going to Cards games, events at the Dome, or Blues games. What's the plan to make Eunice and John and so many other people like them feel safe enough to want to come down to downtown and, participate and get involved and see the city?
Well, I would say to Eunice and John, in the last 18 months, we've, been through a lot in our city, and especially with downtown being, vacant or just, there's not a lot of activity other than the Blues and Cardinals games. And so recently we launched the Downtown Engagement and Public Safety Initiative to address some of the things that have been going on downtown. So number one, I know that you've heard that Rain, the nightclub that was at the center of a lot of controversy around crime in downtown, has been closed for a year. Also, we're finding that parents have been just dropping their children off on the weekends downtown with nothing to do. And so we have engaged several businesses to provide activities for our children downtown. So we held a cipher about a month ago, which is a rap battle, pulling out a DJ. We are planning a movie night for them. We had a esports video game truck maybe a couple weeks ago. So it's about engaging our young people in safe and fun activities in spaces and activating our downtown spaces as well. I also am aware that Metrolink is going to be making some changes to make the trains safer. You all know that we had a honor system when it comes to riding our train system, and they are about to make some changes to make the platforms a lot safer. I'm not at liberty to say what those changes are until they are able to release those to the press. But please know that, I'm working with our MetroLink, working with the Cardinals and the Blues and all of our downtown businesses to make sure that we are that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, that we can protect our assets downtown and also engage our young people in safe and fun activities to make it safer for everybody.
Well, I believe I'll be calling Bi-State and Metro after I get off this call with the mayor and see if I can get any more information there. Phil Miller is asking, there is this divide between St. Louis and St. Louis County, and I know many people on this call do live in St. Louis County. He is asking, what are their constructive roles are there for people who live in the county to play in the city? How can county residents help improve the city, and then vice versa? How can the city work with and help improve the county?
Divide? What divide? I talk to Sam Page almost every other day. We don't feel a divide. But just to answer your question, Sam and I are working on trying to find ways that we can collaborate more often and with our different city departments. Some of the things that we're working on, obviously with public safety, how can we collaborate more there? And other departments, possibly, we're doing a lot on the health side. I know you saw that after I was elected, we made sure that our health directives were matched. So you don't get a different message in the county than you do in the city. And we're still marching forward on health as it relates to COVID and tackling the pandemic. So I would say look forward, even though we may not ever have a city county merger with Sam and I, we make sure that we try to stay in sync more oftentimes than not. And we may not always agree, but you won't see our disagreements in the public sphere.
Bill has an interesting question. He says, how realistic would it be to implement a robust system of participatory budgeting? For some context, the city's budget is $1.1+ billion. So how realistic would it be to have, some citizen participation in distributing that money?
I think we saw a little bit of that this year with the first round of COVID spending. We got a lot of public input there. We got about 2,500 surveys or people answering surveys on how we should spend the money, and pretty much followed a lot of their recommendations. As well as we had several public hearings. With the budget, we had a public hearing where people were able to let us know what their priorities were, and we actually adjusted some of them to match some of the comments that were made during those public hearings. I'm not sure how close we can get to full participatory budgeting, because there are some funds that we just cannot touch that obviously they have to go to the places they go to, but I would like to see some discretionary funds put up for a public process.
You've talked a lot about providing environment for kids to feel comfortable and safe. And one of those is, the physical infrastructure that they're in. And Cheryl Watley is saying infrastructure covers so many areas, and there is money to address things like streets, etc. She said, but I hear no talk about school buildings. So many of these city buildings are so old. Is any of the COVID money or any of the thinking around it directed to updating some of our school buildings?
You'll have to ask that to the school board because that's where the responsibility lies. And if a school building is updated in terms of like turned into condos, that's usually when it's sold to a private developer, and then they develop those buildings into apartments or condominiums. But again, that's where we all have to, I would say, take a step back and look at economic development in terms of our education system. We cannot develop a plan to develop North St. Louis and parts of South St. Louis if education isn't a part of that conversation and the existing school buildings.
We've heard a lot about cybersecurity in the state of Missouri in the last couple of weeks with a supposed hack by a fellow journalist of mine. Anne is asking about computer security in the city of St. Louis. I know we've got a pretty old mainframe system. How is your administration doing at, ensuring cybersecurity for the residents and all of the information that the city needs to run?
Well, I think that we are setting aside, or my plan is to set aside some of the money from ARPA to address improving our computer system. And, it passed the audit, but it did not get a grade because we want to make sure that we don't send a message to the world that we can be hacked. And also, there are other departments that are not on the city's mainframe. Case in point, the treasurer's office, because I was treasurer when we decided to come off of the city's mainframe and off of the city's network to increase our cybersecurity as well. So I'm bringing the lessons that I learned in building a robust cybersecurity network to City Hall, and we'll be hiring a chief technology officer soon, hopefully, to help us address that.
I think the last number I heard was that it's a system from like the 1980s or 1990s. That is, it's not a very, I have friends who work in City Hall who tell me that it's, purple, yellow, pink papers that just move around. It's not a particularly sophisticated system necessarily.
Yeah, we scour the internet for floppy drives.
Are we talking the small floppies or the like big actual floppy?
The small ones, like the 3.5.
Yeah, the harder ones. So I wanted to real quick touch on a couple of policy issues around the pandemic. You mentioned hopefully that we can stop having to wear masks inside, or move away from Zoom meetings and get back to in-person events. Are there metrics that you're looking for that you're going to base things like your masking orders or other public health on to say, yes, we can move back towards whatever normal may look like these days?
Well, we're basing a lot of our guidance based on the recommendations from the St. Louis Regional Task Force for the pandemic. So I've been in contact with them, I think at our last meeting last week, and asked, when do you think that we can stop extending the mask mandate? And they were very conservative and said maybe 2 months, because we still don't know what the flu season, the cold and flu season is going to hold for us. And we could see from last year, having to wear masks pretty frequently and still being under a mask mandate, that there weren't a lot of instances of the cold or common cold or flu because we were all maxed up and we were all inside. So we'll have a little bit more freedom to move around this winter. So hopefully the cold or flu season won't be as bad, but I'm sure that they're still trying to keep an eye on what happens before they give us the all clear, or at least we can at least adjust our mask mandate back to where it was in July.
What is the plan from the city to get the city's full vaccination rate up a little bit higher? I think the last I saw for the eligible population, it's about 55%. Not the worst, but I think you would obviously want it higher. What's the plan to get that number a little higher?
Well, first off, just last week, our new director of health and hospitals started, Dr. Matifaz Deslashwayo Davis. She's an infectious disease and public health expert. And so we're looking forward to her leadership in addressing vaccine hesitancy. I think that's the biggest piece that we have to address. And then also a vaccine hesitancy amongst minority populations is especially going to be critical because still, African Americans are about 36% vaccinated, and we're about 75% of new cases. So we have to make sure that we are increasing vaccinations in those populations. And then also we have to pay strict attention to just in a couple of weeks, the FDA should approve vaccines for children 5 to 11 years old. And so we're going to make sure that we have a huge push with our school districts and our other schools to get our children vaccinated. And we still have vaccine incentives available. We have over $1 million left in gift cards to give out to people to hopefully encourage them to get vaccinated. So we're going to be doing everything that we can. We're also going to get a new mobile vaccination clinic to be able to go door to door and do canvassing, just like a campaign to help people get vaccinated.
Susan has another question that is actually something I deal with a lot. I live at a busy intersection in South St. Louis, and she wrote, cars racing in the streets continues downtown, up and down Lindell and Skinker and other major streets. What is the plan to enforce for some traffic enforcement to, reduce the speeding, the dangerous driving, et cetera, that, puts passengers, pedestrians, et cetera, at risk?
Well, I unfortunately, cameras have been declared unconstitutional, so we can't do that anymore. However, cars racing, this one of the things I found out when I asked my brother, sister mayors across the country, that is a problem that they're having as well in their respective cities. Some are trying to address it by putting more speed humps in other areas, but however, that affects our buses as well as our street plows when it starts to get cold and snow and clearing our streets. Traffic enforcement is an option. However, we want to make sure that with traffic enforcement that we aren't targeting people of color more than anybody else, because unfortunately we're already I think 80%, 80% or more of the stops are people of color in the city of St. Louis versus everybody else. So we have to make sure that, we still center equity in our policing strategies. Unfortunately, there's no silver bullet or no one thing that any city is doing to address the problem of cars racing in our streets.
And if there's one thing anyone knows about the city of St. Louis, it's that snow removal is already a contentious issue on side streets and et cetera. I had a question come in. I don't know if this individual is able to make the meeting, but she did want to know about arts funding and if there was plan for any of the federal money that may be coming in to direct to the city's art scenes, not just to, help it survive after, a year of not having performances, but also thrive.
Yes, absolutely. I've been in contact or in touch with the Regional Arts Commission, which is, a regional board to try to see what we can do to help them. But also I see the arts scene or the arts industry as critical to also helping reduce crime. How can we also engage our young people in the arts? We have a lot of creative young people out here, and I think that their talent has gone untapped. So we have been in contact with several local artists and local organizations that sponsor events for kids with the arts to try to engage them in those activities as well.
We have time for probably 3 or 4 more questions. So if anyone has a pressing one that they haven't gotten answered yet, go ahead and drop it in the chat. Susan Kotzman actually had another one, and you had mentioned, answered this question a little bit at the beginning of what keeps you up at night. And you mentioned seeing the violence in the city, but is there anything else where, you're at home trying to go to sleep and your mind just keeps going back to this one thing that your brain won't let it go?
Well, being a mayor is a really big job. And so, my mind is always racing about, how can we do this differently? And what about this? And what about this department? What about that department? So those are kind of the things that keep me up, or keep a pad and a pen by my bedside to jot these things down so I don't forget them. Or I'll send a quick text message to my staff. They hate that because they'll be like, oh Lord, the mayor's up at 10:30. What is she thinking about now? But it's, that's the kind of thing that just keeps my mind racing. I'm just trying to be creative in how we address issues that have plagued our communities for decades. And I just want to think outside the box.
To answer the question about, is there a deadline for reducing the size of the Board of Aldermen? Yeah, it'll happen, assuming it is not reversed, which I don't think there is time to do legislatively. The next election in 2023 will be for 14 wards down from 28. Mayor Jones, what would you say to, a young person who might be sitting looking at the political environment these days, what it looks like at the national level, local level, et cetera, sees Twitter, sees Facebook and goes, man, I don't know if this is worth it. How would you answer that? What makes this job worth it for you?
I will say that it's not for everybody. I've had to build a thick skin over the years to be able to let the criticism roll off my back like water down a duck's back. But I will say that if you are committed to serving your community, then local government is the best way to do it, because you're able to see those changes in real time. And when I say in real time, at least 6 months to a year's time. And that we need more people with good ideas and to be able to be civil with each other in this space. The civility or the lack of civility in politics that has happened over these, I would say, since the advent of social media, has been just, it can be demoralizing at times. And I can see why people don't want to think of a career in politics. But you also don't have to be the one running for office. A lot of, our workforce is aging in City Hall. And so we will need smart, capable young people to fill a lot of these positions in local government to help some of these people who decide to run for office. So I would say, one of the things that I'm trying to do as mayor is make sure that we can change city government to a career of first choice, not of last resort.
Do we have any other questions for Mayor Jones as we wrap up this afternoon?
These were great questions.
They really were. All right. I'm not seeing any. So Mayor Tishaura Jones, thank you for your time this afternoon. It was a wonderful chat. Like I said, learned a few things. Got a few phone calls I need to make now after this after this call. Judy, Stephen, is there any other closing words?
Yes, good. I want to ask my colleague and friend from the CJW, Jen Bernstein, to just say a quick thank you.
Thank you all so much, and thank you for including us today. This was wonderful, and we really appreciate you both taking time out of your obviously hugely busy days. So we really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you,
Thank
Mayor.
you, Rachel.
Thanks,
We really
Rachel.
enjoyed your presentation today and learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all have a great week.
You too.
Bye,
Thanks
everyone.
again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.